York's classic rock, Q1043.
John Densmore of The Doors joins us, author of a new book, his third. It's called The Seekers.
Hi.
Hi. Look how dapper you look. You put
I
us
only,
all to shame.
I only see you, Shelley. I don't see our guest. There.
No.
Oh, my goodness. Shelley was absolutely correct. You
I
do
mean, look at you.
look like the rock. Whoa.
Well, hi, Jim and Shelley.
Hello, John Densmore,
Hello, John.
Q104.3. Congratulations on the publication of your new book, The
Thank
Seeker.
you.
You must be very excited about it. Different from your prior work, in that
Yeah.
in that you take us on a very, very interesting trip where we meet a lot of very interesting people. Some of the people that we meet in your book are uh, artists and seekers that most people would recognize instantly by name, but there are others that would be obscure to most of us until we read the book and you introduce us to them, and it was just fascinating.
Oh, great. Have we started the interview, Jim?
Yes, we are talking to you. It's a conversation.
Okay.
Sort of.
Yeah. Well, some are well known, some are not that well known, but they're all on the same track. They love sound. And I also try to include the reader that you can get in the same zone as these icons. If you play your piano in a closet and nobody hears it, or you paint and nobody sees it, you're still kind of going into that same area that's so nurturing, kind of medicine for the soul. The arts are
By the
calming.
way, speaking of painting, I enjoyed the photo of your late mother painting
Oh,
just days before her passing. That photo exhibited a lot of joy. It really did, and considering that it was an end of life photo, one
yeah.
wouldn't expect something so joyful, but it was right there.
Well, what was her quote? When I have pain, I paint. And see, there's the key, channel
John,
that
it
angst into something you love.
it really struck me two things about the book. First of all, I think anyone who makes music for joy, for professionally, will really relate because, and I don't, but my husband does. But it was very revealing, the process that you go through and what you hear is different than what I hear. But for a musician, I think that people would love your book. But the other thing I found so fascinating was your fascination with the other side, because I have that same fascination, because that gives me hope, from when we're not here.
Well, Break On Through is quoted many
Right.
times through the book, that title, that's for sure.
Yeah, I do quote George Harrison when he was talking about his connection to John Lennon after John passed, and said, if you don't have a connection with someone you really cared about after they crossed over, how are you going to have a connection with Jesus or Allah or whatever? And, I feel pretty connected to Ray and Jim.
Well, The Doors, of course, one of the most successful and groundbreaking and innovative rock and roll bands in history. You, John Densmore, a legitimate, legendary rock and roll star in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Your music continues to be played every day all over the world. Yet I detected in the pages of your book an innate modesty that allowed you to be able to appreciate the talents of others around you by approaching them in a way that you would possibly have approached them before you could have been considered one of their peers.
Wow. Well, Jim, I too have to go to the bathroom, and got divorced several times. So, yeah, we're all on the same road, whether it's a freeway or a dirt path.
Except some of those artists you took off of your road and placed them up on a big pedestal. And they stayed there throughout your life, where, if you could find a way to use your doors hood maybe to get in and spend a little time with them, you wouldn't hesitate to do so. But you were clearly in awe of many of these artists that you met, especially those that influenced you when you were young.
Well, they're my teachers. When I was young, yeah, it was John Coltrane's drummer and my mom, and now I'm looking at Paul Simon and Willie Nelson are both 10 years older than me. Well, Paul's pushing 80, Willie's 87, 6, 7, I don't know. And they're still creative and vibrant and okay, that's where I want to go.
By the way, we have Shelley and me. We've spent some time on Willie's bus. Uh,
Okay.
We were lucky enough. We were lucky enough.
I was fascinated by how most of us feel that we have control over our life and life circumstances, but uh, just an odd occurrence can change the trajectory of a life. And in your case, John Densmore, if it weren't for an orthodontist, maybe you would have been a woodwind player.
This is true. You know, it's interesting. I was thinking back. The reason my teeth were crooked was because I had this bicycle accident. I fell off my bike and hit my teeth and really messed them up. And wow, when I had played piano, I loved it, and I knew there wasn't a piano in the orchestra, and
In your
I
school.
chose clarinet because I thought Benny Goodman attracted girls, and then the dentist said, no, 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 no. We're trying to push him back. That would push him out. And so, yeah, I guess I owe my career to the orthodontist. Yeah.
And to Mr. Armour, your teacher at school. And when you became, well, a percussionist, I mean, you were able to spend some time with all of the instruments, including timpani. I mean, you got the bug as a school student.
Yeah, I sure did. And I played in the marching band, and the orchestra. And then I played, there's a jazz term for the drum set called traps, TRAPS, which is trapping all those instruments, bass drum, snare drum, cymbals, trapping them all together. And I learned them individually, which is a real good thing.
John,
Uh,
I was curious. You say you talk to Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek all the time. Do you ever feel them with you?
I do. And I have dreams. I dreamt that Jim came back. He was clean and sober and wearing an Armani suit and wanted to play.
Wow.
So, you know, feels good.
um, you mentioned playing in the marching band. Uh, you know Chad Smith of Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Yeah, sure.
and he talks very lovingly of his experience in his high school marching band in Michigan, and says that he learned a lot from that experience. And you also, as a student in school, in your band and orchestra, obviously learned how to read.
Yes, I did. And now I'm going to do a plug for David Byrne. If you see American Utopia, where he's doing all his songs with 11 percussionists with drums strapped to their shoulders, I know uh, how much weight those instruments feel. And wow, that was a wonderful thing to see. Anyway,
Well,
I
your
loved
first
the ensemble, 40 musicians. I mean, it was power, and I liked being a part of it.
And then you had a chance, obviously, much later in life, to perform with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Speaking of a large ensemble and a lot of power.
This is true. There's just a young wonder king here in LA, Gustavo Dudamel, who is just so gifted that he conducts from memory Beethoven and all that stuff. And yeah, we did a fundraiser for the LA Phil and played LA Woman with Chris Martin of Coldplay.
Wow. Maybe we are not too far away from live concerts again, but how have you been doing and what have you been doing during the pandemic and the shutdown?
Well, kind of finishing up the book, getting it all together, photos and credits, and now promoting the book. I'm okay. I've been a writer a while now, so I'm used to this cave existence. But I do miss, live music and the camaraderie of people out there. And oh, I see a little glimmer of light coming, around the corner next year, and we'll get through this, but it'll be a while.
In reading the book, you took the place of Mr. Armour uh, in my mind because you were my teacher when I was reading about reggae. And there has always been something about reggae that I've just never really been able to put my finger on. I could hear it, but I couldn't find the language to explain it. And you reduced it to numbers, to math, and to where the bass drum is played and when the next bar begins. And when I finished reading that paragraph, I finally understood something that I'd been hearing for years but couldn't express. You're a very good writer.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, the thing is, we playing a rhythm, fighting against a system. They flipped it around, which was it's simple, it's not complex, but kind of really turned drummers' heads around. Chad Mitchell Smith would go agree. So I broke it down what they did technically.
But you broke it down in language that a layperson like myself could understand.
Well, that's
And
good. Glad to hear
and
that.
and I appreciated that. Um, when you speak about some of the jazz greats that influenced you that you had an opportunity to know and to meet, uh, your excitement on the page kind of reminded me of the character Guy Patterson that Tom Everett Scott played in That Thing You Do, the 1996 Tom Hanks film, where he
Oh,
ended up as the drummer in a band that had a big hit. He was a young kid who loved jazz and played the drums in his basement. And because the drummer in a local band broke his arm, they needed a substitute. So they hired this guy, and he took his jazz chops to the band and changed their trajectory. And boom, off they went to the top.
what's the name of this movie?
Oh, you
That
haven't
thing
seen
you
it?
do.
I got to check that out.
It's
Yeah,
Jeez.
you would love it. You would
yeah,
love
Yeah.
it.
it's called That Thing You Do.
It's a classic, a modern classic.
Yeah, from
Wow.
1996.
Excellent. Yeah, these guys fed me. I mean, I got the courage to kind of have a conversation with Jim the way Elvin had it with Coltrane. So, and Chico Hamilton provided this little kind of cymbal beat that I put in the end. So, you steal from the best.
And tomorrow's best, well, they steal from you.
Fine. I have this theory. The hippies are on the shoulders of the beatniks, and the punks are on the shoulders of the hippies, and the grunge is on the shoulders of the punks, and so it goes.
Well, you kind of touched on that when you were writing about Patti Smith. Now, your book, for the most part, is extremely complimentary about the people and the giants of our culture that you have run across through the years. But you're not afraid to be critical. In your chapter on Van Morrison, you uh, make clear the point that you believe that he is an incredibly talented musician that has created extraordinary work. But there was something a bit off-putting about him personally, and considering the beautiful music that he's created, I've never quite understood. Van Morrison seems to have this anger. He seems to be mad at his own audience because they like Brown Eyed Girl.
And he dissed you. He dissed you.
Pardon me?
He
He
dissed
dissed
you.
you, John.
He disrespected you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Jim, some creative people have self-destruction and creativity in the same package. I mean, so Van, yeah, He forgot to introduce me at the Hollywood Bowl. Thanks a lot. It was rather
But you were
embarrassing.
standing on the stage at the
You're
time.
right there. You're made a special. I mean, this was a special moment. This was not something that was part of your, you weren't part of the tour. This
Right.
is
You were
a
supposed
special
to play. You
moment.
were supposed to play drums on Gloria.
I,
This was a big, big deal. It had been
I,
rehearsed the whole
And
bit.
then
I
tell the
hear you,
story.
Shelley. What can I say? When I heard Van on the radio in the car for a few months, I turned it off. So there. But
Yeah.
then I heard you were born before the wind, also younger than the sun, and the bonny both as one as we sailed into the mystic. Oh my God. How can I not love him for that?
hmm There was also a funny story about that Paul Simon told you about his experience years and years ago with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, and that's another example of Jim being rather difficult artist, and uh, Paul and I figured out that Jim was nervous when he was so rude to Paul. When Paul came in to wish us luck as the opening act behind Artie Garfunkel and him at Forest Hills, and Jim was kind of rude and oh, geez, so it goes. Well, let's see. The Grateful Dead story. What was that now?
It was
That
about the pony.
yeah, they borrowed his apartment, and he had some sort of antique which was missing later, and then it was returned to them. I can't remember.
40 year later, 40
Yeah,
years
right,
later,
right.
they came
So
across Paul Simon and said, sorry about the pony.
yeah. So
but
I,
but
I said to Paul, 50 years later, I'm sorry, Jim was rude back then.
but it you had, because you were the house band at the Whiskey a Go Go in Los Angeles, you had an opportunity to play with just about everybody who was active at the time, because no matter who the headliner was, you guys were playing two
We were
sets a
the
night.
house band.
Yeah, and so you got to meet a lot of people. And,
Yeah, we
you
met
know,
everybody. And
on
there
the
was a,
way up, at the top, and on the way down, you got to meet
yeah,
them.
there was a camaraderie, but we were kind of a force to be dealt with because we had a following. And, uh, when people dance to our music, they, they meant it. And so if we play the end and then the headliner had to play, it was kind of ominous and hard to do.
Well, in your book, you say that because of this new sort of free form dancing that your fans uh, started to do during your performances, and also the fact that there were silences in your work and among your audience, that this would sometimes make the other acts nervous when they followed
And
you.
Elmer Valentine, the owner of the Whiskey a Go Go, realized, wait a minute, there's a new movement here coming. I think that we should take down the cages with the Go Go girls.
I thought
And
it was
yeah, free form
also
dancing.
it was fascinating you saying that the silence is important, and you're so right.
Yeah, most people don't think of silence. What's that? It's the void. It's nothing. Why even talk about it? Well, if all we had was sound, then there would be no contrast, and we wouldn't really care about it. And so it's subtle, but very important, and it bleeds into my drumming. I'm not real fast, but I leave space for drama.
And you mentioned John Cage in the book, who used silence quite effectively in his very unusual work. And John, I
You know,
remember, I remember one day, just as an aside, several years ago, Paul Sadowski, who was John Cage's personal assistant for many, many, many years, produced a John Cage tribute at Cooper Union here in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And he assembled a cast, and he asked me to participate. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, I just need you to read a few things during the show. And I said, well, sure. And so I showed up for their sound check and rehearsal and found that it wasn't just reading. I mean, there might be one segment where there are 4 lines, but I had to read it in 1 minute and 18 seconds. You know, or there might be 8 lines and they had to be read, you know, in 12 seconds. I mean, it was all weird silences and sounds, and it was nerve-wracking.
I'm sure.
But interesting.
If you see Gustavo Dudamel, the young conductor of the LA Philharmonic, conduct 20 minutes of Beethoven, which is a lot of big sound, and then he keeps his arms held up at the end, and the audience knows they're not supposed to applaud yet till he puts his arms down. And there's this 1 minute of silence that is so delicious and powerful after all that sound. These guys know stuff, Cage and Dudamel.
Well, no doubt, John, you were very excited the first time you heard your own work on the radio. What, did you hear it on KHJ? Were you in LA at the time when you first heard it, when it first came out of the radio? Were you in a car? Were you at home? Where were you?
I was in a car, and I was at a stoplight, and I rolled the window down and shouted to the car next to me, "Hey, that's me." And I turned the radio up.
Well, now it's 2020 and you still hear yourself on the radio. Do you still reach over and turn it up?
Most definitely. I don't listen to Doors songs at home because I've heard them rather quite a bit in the studio. But when someone makes a choice like you guys and I'm in the car, I go with it, you know. Plus, LA Woman is the greatest driving song ever. So,
you know, Shelley,
Yeah.
I've been in a car in the country in the summertime with the windows down while that song played.
Of course.
I know exactly what John Densmore is talking about. Exactly.
And by the way, John Densmore's book, see, it's still time. We're still in Hanukkah, barely. Christmas is next week. This is a perfect gift, especially for the person in your life who makes music. I'm telling you, this is a guide. It could do me no good, but I handed it to my husband and said, you are going to get so much out of this book by John Densmore.
The book is called The Seekers. It's by John Densmore. And what you were just doing vocally just a moment ago reminded me of the portion of the book when you were talking about Indian percussion and learning to sing the percussion part first before you played it on the instrument. That was very interesting, among the hundreds of interesting things that I learned from your book, John.
You mean tita gita tita nana tita gita tita da din da?
Yes, that.
You know, Shelley, I also think that hopefully this book, if you're not a musician, just reading about music, it's kind of calming, and we're in such tumultuous times. Maybe it'll be an antidote to all this craziness.
Well, John Densmore, we thank you very much for getting up early in the morning and joining us here at Q104.3. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and let's hope for better times next year in 2021 for all of us.
Thank you, and thank the both of you for being so knowledgeable about my new one.
We're waiting for the next one too. And I don't know if you remember, but 2.5 years ago, I gave you an award at the Asbury Park Music and Film Festival.
Oh, that's who you are.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
The one who kept saying, I can't believe I'm standing next to John Densmore. Right?
Remember it well. Yeah.
Okay, let's find.
So we're gonna get that film out next year.
Awesome.
You know, the tribute to Ray that was screened at that festival.
Right.
Oh,
and that you won the award for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a nice guy he was. Okay. Have a good one, John.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Adios.
New York's classic rock. Q1043.